Okay, you are listening to Bronze Bites, and the preseason is over. We're moving on to the regular season. There's a week and a half until the regular season gets going with the Thursday night game, Chiefs Lions or something like that. And so we're off and running. And if you want to help us out, support us, like us on YouTube, like the channel, subscribe, tell a friend, all that good stuff. We've gotten a lot of reviews, which has been really helpful. And certainly comments. Yeah, Spotify in particular, we've got a bunch of reviews. I didn't realize we're there, but yes, we've got a whole lot. I think like 25.
Wow. Were they good ones or people hate me still? Give it to me, Pete.
They were good. They were good. Well above 4. I think at least 4 or 5.
And then grovel.
Yes. As it has been for every week, a lot has happened, and we've got to go back to the preseason game, which a bizarre game to say the least, because you go into that and you're like the opening kickoff.
Ugh.
Jakeem Grant, literally, that's the first time he's been on a Browns field, like in a uniform on the field, because obviously the previous year he was hurt in the summer.
Yeah. So
he literally got to do anything, and then immediately ruptures his patella, and it's awful. My immediate thought was just leave the field. Let's just go home. We're good. Nevertheless, they endured, which is weird because you actually had another situation. You had a preseason game canceled over a injury situation where, they were worried. Now the player was ultimately okay and everything, but they just said, no, we're good, and stopped. They played, and it was weird game for a couple of reasons. One, you got the starters minus Joel Bitonio, minus Deshaun Watson, and minus Myles Garrett. Now, a lot of people are up in arms that we were not also minus Denzel Ward because he has a concussion, or I should say is in concussion protocol. That's important to delineate, because that doesn't necessarily mean you have a concussion. And then the Browns are sort of like uneven. Deshaun Watson has 3 outstanding throws in the preseason game, but he also has a couple plays you're sort of like, short hops a ball. There are a couple of plays where it just doesn't look right. And my sense of things right now is that's what Deshaun Watson's going to be like right now at the early part of the season. Those 3 throws, you're like sitting there going, that's 2020 Deshaun Watson. And the ones I mean are that seam to Donovan Peoples-Jones for like 23 yards. Great throw.
Yep.
Extending the play and finding Amari Cooper that went for 53. Not only did he extend the play really well, it came out of his hand effortlessly to get down to a Cooper. And then the corner route to David Njoku, great ball, right on time, in a spot where only Njoku could make a play on it. And those were 3 outstanding plays. And you're sitting going, okay, we're in great shape. But there's, again, some little unevenness. And part of that is no doubt due to the fact that the running back tried to take 2 handoffs like he's in youth.
Flag football.
And just the ball just came out and looked just ugly. And obviously they turned over the other one they got back, but I think that certainly hurt, which made the whole thing like sort of weird. You have your starters, and I'm not suggesting they play Nick Chubb, but you have your starters in there, and then you're like trying to establish Jordan Wilkins.
Right.
Anyway, so offensively, very bizarre sort of game, had some good stuff, but a little up and down.
Well, and not to mention the Chiefs didn't necessarily match the Brown strategy of who they were playing.
They played backups.
Yeah. So to me, a little bit harder to evaluate this game just overall based on the unevenness of just starters versus backups from a Brown situation. To your point, yes, it was comforting to see Deshaun have some of those plays that we expect and are hopefully looking forward to. But again, I don't know that it is telling me more than what I knew 2 weeks ago.
which is why the whole starter conversation, this is what drives me nuts, because if you're not perfect, you end up with more questions than answers.
Agreed. It almost feels like the opposite of what is trying to be accomplished, unless they truly want him to just get reps. But then it's not like he's getting so many reps where it feels like it would be beneficial or even pay off leading up to September 10th. So yeah, I'm a little bit, I guess, perplexed in terms of just walking away from that game and like feeling good, but also I don't know why I would feel better, Pete. Like I'm just
Yeah,
scratching
no.
my head. Like I want to feel better. I
Mhm.
don't know that the way that the game was, who they were playing against, the competition, like again, like they should look dominant. They
Right.
should be making those plays. Like that to me is an expectation. And again, like we're going to be a week from Sunday, the opening season game against the Bengals, and we're going to walk away from that game knowing a hell of a lot more than we have these last 4 weeks. And we're either going to be really, really happy next Sunday at 4 p.m. or really, really sad.
Yeah, so that they will say it's operational. Like the point is they want to get him in and out of the huddle, get Deshaun doing that stuff, and then being able to go to the sideline, make adjustments, and then come back out and sort of get into that habit. Like I understand your thought process, but I don't need a stadium full of people to do that. Like it always just sounds very contrived to me. Like you can't do these things in practice. Of course you can, if you really want to. But they did it that way, and it's whatever. But that's to your point. It's like every miscue looks worse because
Right.
it would have been helpful. Like it would have been great if the Chiefs had their ones in and you're saying, okay, they had their starters in, miscue, fine. But when you're not perfect against backups, then you immediately just get a million questions. So offensively, there are some good things. Don't get me wrong. I mean, like that, but that's my sort of sense of things is like my early expectation for Deshaun Watson is going to be a little uneven, that he's going to have
Oh boy.
outstanding plays. And then you're going to have some of these clunky plays. That doesn't mean they're necessarily turnovers or anything, but you're just going to every so often you could be like, what was that?
Well, I don't know that I'm ready for that. I don't know that Browns Twitter is ready for that.
Now he's saying all the
Lord
right
help us
things.
all, Pete.
Yeah. He's saying all the right things. He's super confident, which is great. So I like what I'm hearing from him, but that's my sense of thing. Now, here again, you got a couple weeks to practice, although
Yeah.
he did not practice today because he was ill, but you've got a lot of time to sort of tune up now that you've sort of trimmed down your roster, and we'll get there. Defensively, again, the word that just jumps out to me is fast. They are very fast.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What they're able to do with their defensive line, which did not have Myles Garrett, which is terrifying for the opponent, that Myles Garrett's not out there and they're doing as much as they are doing. The amount they're able to do up front, having Zadarius Smith, having Dalvin Tomlinson, and having Shelby Harris out there and Obo Okoronkwo and all these different players, they get off the ball and they go. But the guy that's, I think the guy that, and I think we all expected this based on everything they've done, the guy who looked like a superstar out there was JOK. He looked unbelievable. He flying all over the place. And the reason you're not getting blocked. They can't get to him. There's nobody. So he just gets to fly around, making tackles in the backfield. Broke up a pass on a blitz. Broke up a different pass in coverage and then just covered a guy super well. Like you are seeing what we all want to see from JOK, which is just he is everywhere doing stuff and it's just super fun to see. I still think with the little extra training he did, he looks like he's got like a puffy coat on of his little muscle there, but it's awesome.
Insulation.
Yes, he looks like
his
that's
extra little muscles.
yes, that's the like Juan Thornhill had his interception, which is awesome. Like I'm super happy for him. But like that was my biggest takeaway is JOK looks phenomenal.
For me, like kind of the same evaluation. Putting things into perspective, they were playing against backups, but still, like I do want to preface this by saying, and I've acknowledged this like all season long, we have seen or have been accustomed to seeing our defense fold with backups playing. So at least there still was the assertion of dominance and looking really, really good, which is something that we just haven't been accustomed to with the defense specifically. So yeah, I think all of it is exciting. And I mean, Juan Thornhill, though, I mean, with having what's his face from last year, I've already forgotten his name. Like I've moved on. Why have I like John Johnson?
Yes.
I expected John Johnson to look like that. And again, I'm probably being unfair to him just based on like how the defense was constructed overall the last couple of years.
Should have been much better than he was.
Okay, thank you. Juan Thornhill just looked. I mean, when he read that read and he just stepped up and intercepted the ball. Like it just looked easy. Like it looked easy. And I don't feel like I've been able to say that about our safety room just in general. Like nothing has seemed easy for them. It almost has felt like the safety position became our like last resort of backpedaling and trying to save a play from blowing up is like how I've felt like was our defensive model the last couple of years.
Yeah. And again, I think the defensive line is going to allow you to do that when you're not sitting there worried about having to have to
get
focus your attention on stopping the run. And then two, worrying about have to cover forever that guys can run down the field. Now you have sort of a sense of it's going to take me this much time. I can be this much more aggressive to make plays on the ball. Like that is an indication, hopefully, that that's what our DBs are going to be able to do this year, that they're going to be able to make plays on the ball. They're going to be able to be aggressive. And those are the things you want them to be. The problem you run into is like they do all these good things. Juan Thornhill obviously has a great play. They get another tip interception to Rodney McLeod, which is awesome off an Emerson hit. But like then they're also giving up 3rd and 13. You know, that stuff that like
which also feels like something that we're accustomed to.
Yeah, like, and that's the thing that you want to clean up. Like they're giving up a screen and it goes for 23 yards. Like those are those back-breaking plays you need to clean up and
frustrating.
Get cleaned up. But like here again, part of me thinks that that's what this defense is going to do in some respects, that they're going to hit the opponent behind line of scrimmage an awful lot. And every so often they're going to get just caught and give up those type of plays. Are we, and if that's the case, are we going to be okay with that? Obviously, in this case, Shane Buechele is not Patrick Mahomes.
Right.
Being able to dominate him like that, but are you going to be able to knock those plays back? Or are you going to run into situations where now you get caught in mistakes and now Patrick Mahomes is able to pick you apart? Yeah. That's the question they're going to have to answer. And like particularly the depth as they went into this game, like I've talked about this before, Jim Schwartz's scheme requires you to have a lot of talent. Like you have to have dudes. And the second that didn't happen, suddenly the Chiefs are just rolling down the field in this epic comeback because the defense doesn't do that much realistically without the defensive line being able to dominate up front, with your corners sort of being exposed and being picked apart. Right. And like the people who assume, Jim Schwartz, if he was here last year, the Browns would have been so much better. I got news for you. Like it would not have gone well. Maybe he would have been better. I think he would have coached his coaches better. And certainly that would have been better than what we had. But ultimately his defense is going to work because they have Zadarius Smith, because they have Dalvin Tomlinson, because they got Juan Thornhill, because they added a ton of talent. And that's, that's not a news flash. You are generally going to be much better when you have better talent. But I think particularly with these defense, it was incumbent on the Browns to deliver. They did. And it's gonna require them to be able to be dominant up front to allow them to do all these things. Now, based on what I've seen, I'm pretty encouraged by what I've seen, but I do want to see them work to clean up some of those things so they don't give up 3rd and 13 or whatever situation that sort of becomes a back-breaking type play that keeps the defense on the field. They got to get off the field. They got to be able to get stops and do all those things. So overall, go ahead.
I guess where I'm at with that, like it's bound to happen. Like it's going to happen. I would rather have that than this like bend and don't break defense.
Sure. Attack.
And yeah, exactly. I would rather be on the attack than have to watch that, because that just felt like the inevitable was bound to happen. And it was only a matter of time until the offense scored points. It was whether it was going to be a field goal or a touchdown. Like that's how I felt about our defense.
Yeah, the Browns defense last year, and some of this was on talent, some of this was on coaching, was our goal is to hold you to 3.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's,
I hate that. It was not
it's
fun
frustrating to watch. And obviously the Browns offense wasn't good enough last year to be able to just absorb points over and over and over again. I mean, the Buffalo Bills, when they had like 6 field goals, Browns still lose.
Right.
So here, I agree. I like the fact that Jim Schwartz is trying to make plays. He's trying to put you behind the sticks. He's trying to force you to be in an awkward situation. If he can do that, he's got a good shot to either cause a turnover or force a punt.
Yeah, Great. Make the other team uncomfortable. Like
Yes, I agree.
the offenses that we played against last year, regardless of who they had at quarterback, looked way too comfortable. So like, let's make some
Yep.
people uncomfortable and let's see what happens.
This game ends with the yeah
Eat.
the end basically.
Talk about inevitable.
Cade York's Waterloo. It just
I cursed him. It's my
bad.
fault.
It's bad. It just
It's my fault.
I what's funny is like the amount of consternation by both some media and fans. Like the Browns are just gonna be like, no, we're good. We've spent $250 million on our roster. We've done all this leveraging with the salary cap.
We're just
We've
gonna let it fly.
put it all in. We're just like, now we're good. We're fine. Like it made no sense. And obviously they went out and traded for the Chargers kicker, whose name I've already forgotten. Dustin Hopkins. Because I don't
At
care.
first, you know how many times I had to read that though, and that it didn't say DeAndre Hopkins. Like
that was like, Jack Duffin's been rolling with that all week on terms
5 times
of talking about the Browns got their D Hop. I don't care what his name is. It's just put it through the uprights. That's his name.
Yes.
It either goes in the uprights or it's somebody else. No, they cut.
Wait, Pete, can I just like touch on this for a minute? Because I know that, we talked about the importance of touchdowns and points and all of that. And Cade York just was unfortunately inconsistent, unreliable. I don't think the Browns were looking for perfection. I truly don't. I think fans maybe wanted perfection, but I don't think the Browns were requiring perfection from him. I think they wanted to see some level of consistency and reliability, to which he didn't show either of those things to make a confident decision moving forward with him. And like where that leads me is from a kicking standpoint, we are probably pretty fortunate at this point in the season leading up to the actual season if the kicker is the biggest problem. Like it's actually like frustrating that is what's dominating the conversation and the discussion. But then like the more I thought about it, I'm like, wow, like to actually be arguing about the kicker, I would rather be in this spot 100% than where we've been in the past.
Yes, it's the biggest deal for the Browns and the 49ers, which
imagine that.
Yeah. So doing pretty good. The other part of coming out of that game is injuries. Jordan Kunashik,
Yes.
MCL tear, awful. He's going to miss at least the first month. That's unfortunate in a number of ways. Linebacker depth, special teams player. And for him, it was just, he was a safe roster. He was going to make the roster. Like the Browns loved everything he was doing and he was going to make the roster. Now he's obviously still going to end up on the roster so long as his knee heals. Just giant bummer. And then obviously Denzel Ward with the going into concussion protocol. And the thing that drives me nuts is I know everybody's well-meaning with this and like saying, well, oh, you should consider retirement, all this. Like it's a lot of people going off super bad information, and like the way concussions of science has moved isn't like people are treating it like it's points on your license. And after so many points, like you lose your license, or in this case, your brain. It's not how it works. And like, I'm not a doctor, but I can tell you that like the biggest game changer has been just allowing people to properly heal from concussions. Like, taking the full time, it's like a bruise. And I know people will get all irate about what's this, that, and the other thing. That's been the biggest game changer. And the Browns, to their credit, have been super conservative with their players and holding guys out seemingly almost longer than anybody else when they've come to these injuries, so that it allows you to keep these guys going. The biggest problem you run into with concussions is you come back too fast and you get another one. The other part that people conflate is it's the repetitive head hitting things, which is not limited to football, but certainly happens in football, where you are those impacts that aren't concussions, but are just consistently impacting over again, that lead to you to the problems with CTE and stuff. Like, as I said, I'm not an expert, but I would tell you that like when people just speculate, as they are with Denzel Ward, it's problematic for younger people and parents who then indulge in this and go, well, Denzel Ward's got his 4th concussion and his life, where people are treating like his life is over. If my young daughter who plays soccer or cheerleading, which is a weirdly dangerous sport for concussions, like based on data, with the throwing in throwing them up in the air and everything else, or football or whatever, like basketball has a decent amount of concussions. Like, should I immediately stop playing sports? And like, that becomes very scary for people. So I would urge people to stop doing this, as well-meaning as they are. You're not talking to Denzel Ward. You're not talking to Denzel Ward's doctor. You're not talking to anyone else, Denzel Ward. You're taking one piece of information and going, oh, I guess he should retire, and scaring the crap out of people in the process.
Yeah. To me, this has just something to do with concussions are just generally talked about more in the most recent years, that it's just become a bigger deal overall. Like even in youth sports, like you're familiar with this, like the Lindsay's Law Act and like all of these,
I have
all
a
of
funny
these
story on that.
Yeah. So with youth sports, you're pretty much signing up for all of these potential risks or dangers because we're just aware of it. It's the same thing. Like we're just smarter these days. So I think everybody now has an opinion on it, wants to talk about it, discuss it. And it's obviously even more apparent in the NFL because there's just been more research done, but it's just a more familiar process. And so that's where I feel like this is all stemming from.
The other part of that is the other end with medical technology is getting better. Like,
correct, as
like,
it should.
Bernie Kosar is a great example of this, where like several years ago, it was really bad. And he's improved. Now he's, it is what it is. He's still, but like things have changed. But anyway, as far as the Lindsay's Law, what's funny is like when that came out, there were two people involved. Obviously, the Lindsay person, and then there was a kid named Caleb Perkins who was a student at Revere. I coached at Revere, and I knew that kid. And he collapsed at track. I do not coach track, but somebody I coached with the football was literally who went out, got the AD, and saved his life. So he's in the video that you're supposed to watch every time we have coaches recertify for Lindsay's Law. He's in the video, which is just really entertaining to me. But yeah,
interesting.
So it's like I get it. Everybody's well-meaning. They want to look out for Denzel Ward and everything, but it's like you are going off. It's as ridiculous to me as the people who try to psychoanalyze, in this case, Cade York, and like,
oh yeah, the mental.
Yes, the people who go,
mentally ruined.
Clearly, he needs a sports psychiatrist. Okay, you basically no one has ever heard the guy speak other than like most recently when he was frustrated with reporters.
Okay, so wait, can we pause there for a minute, because I did hear those clips and like clearly he was very frustrated, which
I sympathize with him.
I do as well. And again, we have to remember that these players are humans, and just think about like your own day-to-day life. There are certain things that probably set you off where your immediate response is to be frustrated or to snap back at someone. Like we're all guilty of that as humans. I don't know why we expect players to be perfectly tame and unemotional in their responses. In fact, if he was unemotional about it, people would be complaining even more. So let's just think about that for a minute. But I did hear Mary Kay this morning. I think I might have been listening to her podcast, and she talked about Cade's lack of willingness to listen to Phil Dawson or to like be compared to him, or like didn't want anything to do with the Phil Dawson name. And like I found that whole thing quite fascinating, because I wasn't really sure what I was supposed to take away from it, other than like Phil Dawson is like viewed as a god in this town,
which is infuriating because we're never going to get past it.
But also hilarious to the sense of like we had nothing good going on at that time, that like the kicker was our most like prized possession. A little bit pathetic if you ask me. But from me, like I guess what I took away from that is like, number one, just a reminder that he's still very young, because to me that is just a very like young, immature maybe way to look at things, and maybe even a little bit off-putting, if that's the right word that I'm looking for. I think it is, just because like again, I just like it's okay to acknowledge the past while still being respectful of it, and still being confident in yourself, and like being able to separate yourself from the past. Like I understand That's a tough thing to do. Like anyone that has to fill Joe Thomas's shoes, like it's impossible to do. However, you can still acknowledge that there are these really good players that came before you that are idolized in a sense, still pay that respect, if you will, and be okay and comfortable with yourself. It just showed, I guess, a sense of maybe insecurity for someone who I'm being told is like super confident.
He's 22. I mean,
yeah, I mean, that's just, I guess, a 22-year-old. I mean, generational probably as well with.
Well, I mean, there's some element of like everybody is who's never kicked anything in their life is telling this guy how to do it.
Yeah.
And who he has to talk to and everything else. And like, I get why you'd be sort of annoyed after a while of being like, you have no idea what my job involves, but you're going to tell me how to do it or who I have to listen to and everything else. Like, that's the part where I sort of sympathize with him. It's like anyone else would be sort of infuriated if like, and I get it. People are going to react and go, well, that just comes with the territory. Fine. But if a reporter comes up to you at your job who has no idea how it really goes and like is asking you, why did you do it this way? Why didn't you listen to this guy who's a legend at your company and all this other stuff? Like there's some element of like, just shut up. It's okay not to know and move on. Like the thing that I say with the kicking is like, I'm okay with saying, I don't know what the problem is. There are certain things I think are technical with the way the ball sort of has a draw to it, to try to use a golfing term. I don't golf, don't care about golf. And the ball tends to push. But like beyond that, here's my analysis. I hope the ball goes through the uprights. I hope it gets fixed. That's all I've got for you.
Agreed. My only yes, understand. I'm sympathetic to him in a way that yes, it's probably frustrating to have to answer these questions from people that don't actually know the ins and outs or the techniques of kicking. I was just a little bit thrown off with maybe his hesitation to listen to someone who had success in Cleveland.
Sure.
Like that.
No, I think there's a little bit of
friction. I don't know what the word is, but like at the end of the day, like you don't have a job.
Right.
So like if you, in hindsight, if you had to do things over again, like maybe that's a starting point. Like maybe just taking the opportunity, like that's where you're at right now.
Potentially. Now what's funny is like what the cosmic balance that has been this Browns roster. It will be entertaining as hell if he ends up on the Browns practice squad. One, I think the Browns
I don't want this. I don't want to kick around the practice squad.
You're all emotional. All you fans who go, I just want him to go away. He's talented. I don't care if he figures it out in a year and he's good. No one's going to care. All they're going to be is really happy that they've got this guy who can kick field goals. But ultimately, that not only is it good for the Browns, it's also great for content. Obviously, that he's still here. But then he can just work in anonymity. Nobody's got to think about it. But like, yeah. So they get Dustin Hopkins, who is pretty reliable inside of 49 yards, but like highlights why they tried to do Cade York. Doesn't have a leg beyond that. He's not going to be able to do a whole lot from deep kicks. And obviously he's coming from Los Angeles as opposed to Pittsburgh or New England or any of these other places. And I think I think he will be fine ultimately kicking within a certain range, but like that's the reason you try to do this. So ultimately that's why I would sort of hope that Cade York could get on the practice squad or somebody that has a long, strong enough leg that you can work with. But we'll see what happens. But that sort of transitions us into where we are now, which is the process of putting together the roster and ultimately cutting 37 players in all with some roster gymnastics that come with it. The one thing, to sort of balance out the Jakeem Grant thing, which is super frustrating for everybody and obviously crushingly disappointed, is that, again, in this sort of weird cosmic balance thing, we get Marquise Goodwin back, who's everybody loves, super positive, has been like, even as he's gone through this, has been like super engaged. He's been coaching guys up. He's been involved. He's been in Berea the entire time trying to do this and trying to be great. Like Mary Kay Cabot wrote like a happy camper of the year thing just because he's been so positive, which is awesome. Like it's good that you have this guy who's like super committed to being here and has like been engaged, because obviously it's very easy for players to be injured or dealing with something like this to sort of take themselves out of it. So you get Marquise Goodwin back. which obviously changes how the Browns can attack opponents, brings that speed threat, which is great, adds a little dynamic. And then obviously it sort of complicated things with the rest of their roster. So good news, Marquise Goodwin's back. He's healthy. The most religious press conference I've ever seen in my life today. Very thankful for his Lord and Savior and everything else, and hopes. I believe at one point he hoped that God would lead him to be a billionaire, which sure, I'm with you. So yeah, he's back. Good stuff.
So Marquise Goodwin. So yes, this game was a surprise.
Yes.
Just because there was just a lot of unknowns. We hadn't really heard how he was doing and whether that was because they didn't quite know the status of him or like what the recovery time would be. Like we weren't really getting updated on his status along the way. And I know there are a lot of people really excited about this activation just based on the fact that, he's the burner. He's the X factor, if you will, and kind of balances out and rounds out that wide receiving room. So with that being said, I was very sad to see my man Austin Watkins not get a roster spot, which again, not really surprising. Actually made me happy in the sense that I just think the mindset overall has shifted where you look at the team, you look at the roster. We don't need preseason superstars to make the team and have to rely on them. So while personally it was fun rooting for him in preseason, no different than Dorian Thompson-Robinson, I'm happy I don't have to see him be an integral part of the offense, if that makes sense.
No, I mean, look, it's very difficult to know what you really have in him. He was in the CFL and the USFL. This is his first NFL training camp. I'm very curious to see if he gets picked up, claimed by somebody else, because if he ends up on the practice squad, everybody's going to be sitting there super excited.
I would love that.
And obviously he'd get to stay here and everything else. So that'd be great. We'll see where he ends up on that. But yeah, I mean, look, the bottom line is third string X that doesn't play special teams is a really difficult thing to fit on your roster. And it was always going to be temporary pending Marquise Goodwin. Now, again, some of the same doctors that were diagnosing and trying to throw Denzel Ward into retirement were also telling me that Marquise Goodwin was never going to play this year. Well, maybe we'll listen to his doctors as opposed to you who have not spoken to anyone and anything else. Hard to know what's going to happen. What's interesting is he has been obviously working out. So this has not been like actively taking blood thinners this whole time. Whatever he was doing and the regimen he was on has allowed him to sort of he's been working on the side a lot. Now, they've also got 2 weeks, which should help. But are they going to really feel comfortable throwing him right out there game one? To be determined. That's going to be an interesting thing to sort of keep an eye on. How long it takes for them to get fully integrated, fully back into this. And what is even that? Like, certainly there's going to be ways you use him, but he's not a guy that's going to be like a high volume target anyway. So it's very curious to see what happens there. And then the other thing that happened along with that is after an hour after Kevin Stefanski said that Joshua Dobbs was a backup, he's traded and goes to the Arizona Cardinals, who seem to be intent on losing every game they can, not because they traded for Joshua Dobbs, but everything else they've done suggests they're all in on Caleb Williams from USC. So as a result, the Browns flip picks. They send a 7th with Josh Dobbs to the Cardinals, and they get the Cardinals 5th, which I suspect will be very high in the round, like 1, which should be pretty good. It's a great trade for the Browns. Joshua Dobbs is in a competition to start now because the Cardinals turned around and cut Colt McCoy. It's between him and a rookie that they just got, so it wouldn't surprise me at all if Dobbs is playing early. Clayton Tune is the kid he's competing against. So it's sort of like a win-win. And then the other part of that is now Dorian Thompson-Robinson is your backup quarterback, which a lot of people were pushing for. I wasn't in a huge hurry. Didn't have like a dog in this fight, but I wasn't really worried about sort of thrusting him into becoming a superstar at this point. I was perfectly fine to just enjoy him, which, that Chiefs game, certainly, again, more fun with him. Everything with him has been great. and now we get to wait for hopefully another year before we see him again. But yeah, that's the other shoe that drops with that. Browns move up with their picks. They traded a seventh in 2025 to get Dustin Hopkins, which is basically nothing. So yeah, the Browns have improved their draft situation and cleaned up gave an answer to a roster spot. They're not going to carry 3 quarterbacks this year. Most likely, I assume Kellen Mond will end up on the Browns practice squad. I don't see a whole lot of teams being there. No, we got to get Kellen Mond, but they like him. They like Kellen Mond, even though, I think he's whatever. But he gives you a third string guy who knows your system, can do things on scout team. In fact, last year, some of the time he's playing wide receiver as scout team to sort of help you out, which is good. Gives you an extra roster spot. That extra roster spot, as far as like how I projected it, went to DeAnthony Bell. In fact, when the dust settles, I'm pretty sure I'm going to have the only one player off. So I did pretty good on that.
Bragging rights.
That's
Pete.
right. Now, speaking of bragging rights, go ahead and spike the football.
What am I spiking it on?
Ronnie Hickman and Mahmoud Diabate both made the roster.
Oh, yes. The undrafted free agents, my guys. Well, they look like they belonged the entire preseason. So
yeah. That's good. That's good. I like belong guys who look like they're NFL players making the team.
Yes, agreed. Again, we could argue that maybe hasn't happened before. No, but I'm really happy for them. I feel like they deserved roster spots and happy to see them like make the final cut overall.
Yeah, I think the Kunashik injury made it very easy for the Browns.
Agreed.
With Diabate, which is, great for him. It also, I think, sealed the deal on Matthew Adams, making it as a special teamer. I kind of thought that they might cut him and try to bring him on the practice squad. But with Kunashik injury, I totally get it. We'll go through it. Oh, I forgot the other trade that the Browns made. The Browns send Tyrone Wheatley Jr., the son of the former Michigan great, who I'm sure your husband's a big fan of, Tyrone Wheatley, in exchange for Pierre Strong Jr., who Bree was a huge fan of coming out of South Dakota State. She's all over that area of the country in terms of scouting. I actually really
wait, Pete, I can't believe all this happened since our last podcast.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
How did this all happen?
I really like Pierre Strong coming out of college. Just super speedy guy, unbelievable workout numbers, crushed it for South Dakota State. And then you watch him with the Patriots, like the clips you find of him are like really good. And they just had so many backs that he sort of got lost there. But he fits perfectly for the Browns because he does a lot of things Hassan Hall can do and Demetric Felton can do in terms of raw speed. But he's gives you a little bit more. He's a little bit stronger, very quick, can make guys miss, but just does things you're sitting there going, he's interesting. And the Patriots used a 4th round pick on him either last year or the year before to get him. He's young, got a lot to offer, and I think he's a good fit for that third string back. And we'll see what happens with Jerome Ford. He may have to be ready to go quicker than that, depending on the recovery of the hamstring. So those are your 3 backs.
Well, I was going to ask, what is happening with Jerome Ford? Because the other question mark, I assume, is he did a lot of kick returns, right? Last year, he was our guy.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So who are we starting out there? I know Donovan Peoples-Jones is the answer for punt return, but
I would hope. That's an interesting question, though. I was sort of here again with the Jakeem Grant thing. The way they handled it almost made me think they were, sort of relying on him more than I would have liked. I hope I'm wrong on that. I got a weird vibe with that whole thing. Because DPJ was very good at it last year.
Yeah,
and I hope they go with that. I suspect Pierre Strong will be back there with Jerome Ford whenever he's ready to go. Because again, 4.3 something speed, good size, and everything else with that.
Yeah, so, he also did well last year.
Jerome Ford was very good. Yeah. So I assume when he's healthy, and again, everything the Browns are saying Ford is supposed to be ready for week 1. We shall see. Obviously the worry you have there a little bit is just the fact that he hasn't been able to do anything for the weeks and weeks and weeks. How ready is he going to be? Is he going to be tentative based on the hamstring? I assume they will have figured that out before he's out there, but it's one more thing to keep an eye on. Wide receivers, talked about Austin Watkins. We saw the sort of unceremonious end to Anthony Schwartz, who was waived with an injury designation, which is interesting. because if nobody else claims him, healthy Anthony Schwartz would be picked up. I'm curious to see if he if everybody passes on him, he reverts to the Browns injured reserve until his hamstring is healed, and then he sort of gets released and goes somewhere else or whatever. He will get more than one opportunity elsewhere to make it work. Just too much speed. Teams are always going to bet on it. And there are plenty of teams that are awful that can afford to spend that opportunity on it, because if it works, it's a huge pickup for you and free. Obviously, the Browns have been able to do that, capitalizing on other teams. Ethan Posick is the ultimate example of a guy that other teams are just sort of like, we don't think he's very good. And now he's starting center and was one of the best centers in the league last year.
Yeah.
I'm not going to suggest that Anthony Schwartz is going to be one of the best receivers in the league at any time soon, but it's just one of those things. He has to catch
the ball in order to do that, Pete.
True. Well, it helps. I do think that you're going to see him catch on. Hopefully, I root for him. Here's the thing, he was class the whole way. People just ragged on him. Obviously had some, questions with his mental health. Understandable given what he was dealing with. He never complained. He worked hard. Teammates root for him like crazy. Even when he was cut, you got guys like tweeting at him. He tweeted out that just thanks for the opportunity and all this other stuff. It's just one of those things where it's not his fault the Browns took him with a 3rd round pick. And certainly it does not, it's not a great look for Andrew Berry that your 3rd round pick didn't do much. Although I would point out he did help you win the Tampa Bay Bucks game last year. Can't take that away from him, but not enough for what you paid for. It's not a good pick. Likewise, Cade York, not a good pick. Likewise, Perrin Winfrey, not a good pick. Your 4th round from last year has been wiped out already. There's no getting around the fact that those were not good selections. Even if Cade York ends up on the practice squad and ultimately does figure it out and stays at the Browns, you're still going to look back at that and go, not a good pick, because they had to then use another pick to go get somebody to fill the void. Those are absolutely fair criticisms. My defense of Andrew Berry in that case would be the only thing would be to point out he's been very good at cleaning up mistakes. And people can complain. Mm-hmm. I think, frankly, meaninglessly, they held on to Anthony Schwartz too long. It didn't matter. Got rid of Perrion Winfrey. Again, I thought too late. Should have cut him initially with the first issue. And Cade York, he cut right at the time he should have. That's fine. But you look back and you go, well, how did he deal with that? Well, Anthony Schwartz, he traded for Elijah Moore. He got the speed he wanted and got Marquise Goodwin, another speed guy. And the Browns seem to be very, very happy with Elijah Moore. We'll see what Marquise Goodwin does. In the case of Perrion Winfrey, they got Shelby Harris. They drafted Siaki Ika. We'll see how that part goes. But when the Browns screw up with their draft picks, as is going to happen, you're not going to hit them all. And you can question process. I'm with you there with Anthony Schwartz. He was overdrafted. Perrion Winfrey, wild card because of off field and everything else. And then Cade York, because of the volatility of kickers, it's a weirdly small percentage success rate, which is why, most people say don't do it, that they have been able to react. They have been able to backfill it. The Browns are not going into the season going, well, shit, we lost a third, a fourth, and a fourth, and now our team is screwed. They aren't.
No.
And I think that's important to be resilient in that, but you can still criticize and go that they've got to draft better. It helps that the Browns have 9 rookies making this team who, largely look like they are good enough to be on an NFL team. Obviously, Cedric Tillman looks very good. Dorian Thompson-Robinson looks very good. DeJuan Jones looks very good. Cameron Mitchell looks very good. Luke Whippler looks very good. I think Isaiah McGuire will be okay. I have questions with Siaki Ika. And then because of the way they changed their draft strategy, which I applaud, they also add for free as part of this draft class, Ronnie Hickman and Mahmoud Diabate. You get 9 players. That's awesome out of the draft. I'm hopeful that because Andrew Berry does some of these other things so well, that if he gets a good return on this draft class, it should sort of propel the Browns roster building the coming years, because they don't have to now go back and find ways to replace these guys. So I think that stuff's important.
Well, yeah, not to mention we can be critical of Andrew Barry and even Kevin Stefanski it for whatever, like for mistakes, if you want to call them that, or like
Playing
maybe
starters in
misses
the
in the
preseason game.
draft, play calling if you want to harp on Kevin Stefanski because you're annoyed. But the fact of the matter is, if they go out there and win football games, like none of this is going to be part of the conversation. It's obviously part of the conversation right now because it's all we have to talk about. And we're trying to evaluate how this season is going to go based off of a couple of preseason games and a couple of players that didn't end up panning out that are no longer on this team or potentially not going to be on this team. But again, like if this team goes on to win football games and they have a positive season, then no one's going to be looking back and going like, I can't believe you did this. I can't believe like these are the mistakes you made. But on the flip side, if things don't go well, then like all of these things just become like an even bigger stain on Andrew Barry's career and Kevin Stefanski. I mean, I don't know, Pete, do you think there's pressure? Like, I know we've talked about pressure before, like going into this season, but as we get closer, like 1 week away from the official kickoff to the NFL season, do you feel like the pressure has ramped up just based on the moves that have been made, decisions about players, who's on this roster? Because like when we first started recording this offseason, I felt like we were like, oh, like doesn't really feel like there's a ton of pressure. But I feel like my tone has changed with that.
I don't feel a lot of pressure from ownership. Like they came out and they were pretty, even keeled with the whole thing. Now, if they're 0-2, you never know. I think there's more pressure on Kevin Stefanski than Andrew Barry. Short of Deshaun Watson doing anything that may or may not have happened, definitely happened. Previously, I think Andrew Barry's a lock for a contract extension. He's 36.
Yeah, he's young.
And he's getting if you look at it, his career arc has gone very similarly to Howie Roseman with Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
Philadelphia Eagles fans hated him. He could not draft in their eyes. He was awful, but he'd crush it in trades and contracts and all these like things where you're winning on the margins, which is what Andrew Barry does. Like now he's doing all those things. And now, again, you look at this draft class and you're sitting go without a first round pick, without a second round pick, they look pretty good. And if he's able to do that, and again, it's not going to be perfect. You're going to have drafts that don't go well. But if your process is consistently good in terms of how you evaluate and where you're taking chances and what types of players you're taking chances on, and just that process goes well, like you can easily picture a scenario where Andrew Barry is here for another 20 years.
Yeah, which is what we should all be rooting for.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I think the dude in Pittsburgh is going to be there forever. He's really good. I'm already annoyed. Omar Khan, very good. Kevin Stefanski, I think there's more pressure on him. One,
you do.
And again, ultimately, Andrew Barry, Andrew Barry's job is obviously not done. But 2 weeks in the season, you're basically going, here's your roster, basically.
Yep.
It looks very good. You have to make it work.
Yeah.
And that's where sort of like it becomes very easy to defend the GM on the decisions he's made, especially this past offseason, as opposed to the coach. Like if they go 9-8 and don't make the playoffs, like I don't know that the Haslams are necessarily going to fight because I think they really like who they have.
Yeah.
But I think they also are sort of like, we're paying a lot of money for this. It's most in the league by far. Mm-hmm. And even their ability to manipulate the cap in large part because Jimmy Haslam is saying, I'm fine with this. I'm willing to pay out this extra money to continue to do this. So at some point you have to be sitting there if you're Jimmy Haslam going, I'm paying a whole lot of money and we're still not there. So I think if something was likely to change, I think it's more likely to be Stefanski. I think Andrew Barry, as I said, unless Deshaun Watson does something, I think he's going to be around for a very long time, and then they would change the coach. Having said that, I feel very good about Kevin Stefanski. You can quibble with certain things. Again, I would quibble with playing starters in the preseason. I don't like it. I think there's better ways to do that. There's always going to be decisions where I can sort of nitpick and complain about, but I think overall his process offensively, and here's the thing, and I've talked about this endlessly, he makes quarterbacks better. Like from Kirk Cousins, when he was an OC with the Minnesota Vikings, his only playoff win, Kirk Cousins' only playoff win, he was super efficient that year. He made Stephon Diggs' efficiency off the charts to Baker Mayfield in 2020, his best year ever, to Jacoby Brissett having at worst tied for the best season he's ever had, to we'll see what happens with Deshaun Watson. But like, and I think Dorian Thompson-Robinson is very, very good and talented, but some of that is because he's being put in position to succeed, and whatever Kevin Stefanski has a way of working. And I think people make a very dumb mistake assuming that, oh, you can just throw a coordinator in there and he'll make it work. Like, there's a part of this. Don't mess around with guys who are very good at the quarterback position, because that is the most important thing in the sport. If that's working, try not to mess with it. And, you know, the last time the Browns did that, it was Marty Schottenheimer. Marty Schottenheimer, defensive guy, but was phenomenal with quarterbacks. Obviously, most of that was post Cleveland, but obviously he had Kosar. He benched Drew Brees, which Drew Brees will tell you was the best thing that ever happened to Drew Brees. Drew Brees could go to the Hall of Fame. He was coached with Joe Montana when he went to the Chiefs. He's coached a lot of these guys, and like, they've done well with him. Like, he has that whatever touch, that gift that sort of allowed, like, you know, you always assume offensive guys. He's a defensive guy who's got that gift. So that's always been a thing for me, is you want Kevin Stefanski to get better every year, but like, there are certain things you do not want to mess with. Quarterback is one of them. Deshaun Watson certainly seems to like him. Now, again, they lose a bunch of games. Deshaun Watson could change his tune, but I'm very confident in what they have.
I really hope so. I feel like there's still just a lot of chatter overall questioning Kevin Stefanski overall, and like people not believing in him. And I just find it fascinating, because I think the fan base perspective is that there is a ton of pressure on this season specifically. And if things don't go right, then it's going to be like dumpster fire. We have to like start all over again. And I just like really, I just like want to temper that, because I understand that like the roster looks really good. The quarterback is in position. The expectations in our mind are very high. I just like, the fact of the matter is we just don't know yet. We just don't know what we're going to get from Deshaun Watson. And so I think the immediate response is that Kevin Stefanski will be at fault for that. And like, it's on him if that is the case.
Yeah. One, nature of the beast. He knows that. But as we've talked about, I firmly believe Kevin Stefanski goes into work every day with the biggest smile on his face, because he's got everything he ever wanted. Got the quarterback he wanted. Got the defensive coordinator he wanted. He got the weapon he wanted that does the things that he liked, with whether it was Percy Harvin or Cordero Patterson. He got his Elijah Moore.
Yeah.
Like, that was a big thing for him. He got the special teams coach he wanted. Like, he has
all the tools in the toolbox.
He got all the things he wanted, which again, in some ways ramps up pressure. But like, I don't feel like he comes into work. I think there are fans that want him to feel it.
Yeah.
I don't think most coaches, I mean, there's some that ultimately do. But I think you're in this job, you're hired to get fired. He's doing it his way, which I applaud. I mean, if you're going to do it, take your shot.
Yeah. And at least go out with like feeling like you got everything that you wanted, at least to support you in that position. Like, that's all you could ever ask for from people that are higher up than you, is to like invest in you, invest in your ideas, invest and back you and support you. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Now, the other part of about this is, I would say this is easily the most talented defense since 1994, without question.
Woo!
It's not even close based on everything they had. Again, comes with pressure, but it also potentially provides you with a little relief. Yeah. If Deshaun Watson is not
safety net,
if he's not there yet, but the defense is really good as it can, like, you just run off the names: Myles Garrett, Zadarius Smith, Dalvin Tomlinson, JOK, Anthony Walker, Denzel Ward, Juan Thornhill, Martin Emerson, Greg News. Like, it's a lot of dudes where you're sitting there going, I am excited about all these guys. Like, you're not sitting there going, I don't know about insert guy. Like, you were genuinely excited about basically everybody on this defensive roster. So, like, if they don't come out on fire offensively, and here's the thing, like, we didn't feel good about the offense last year, and they came out firing. So he does. I think part of it is like, because the Browns haven't had success, we are so bad at giving anybody any credit or having allowing them credibility. But like the defense is in position to sort of help the offense out if need be. I hope it comes, nothing would make me happier than 43-0 week 1. I don't think that's what's going to happen, but I do think that becomes a big help. And as we've talked about, and we'll get into this next week with the interim where we are when this team predictions. I still do think the early part of the season is going to be a bitch. And then at some point, as long as they get through that, they're going to click and run off a ton of wins in a row. At one point, I suggested 9 or 10.
Woo! Slow down,
but you'll see on the schedule where things get weird. You've got teams who don't look like they're too interested in this season, but it's just it's on him ultimately to put it together. It's a bottom line business in that regard. But I do feel very good about the people they have in place. The other part of you get into this and you're like, well, I want to fire Kevin Stefanski. Okay, but are you willing to lose Bill Callahan? Are you willing to lose Stump Mitchell? Are you willing to lose Chad O'Shea? Are you willing? A lot of guys,
all these guys, all the guys that people love that are fan favorites.
All these very good coaches. So that's the other element that goes. Anyway, we got off track on the roster. Tight ends. David Njoku looks like an absolute stud. He looks like he's poised to have the best of his career. He had a great year last year. If not for the high ankle sprain, he would have hit every career mark. But even just an efficiency standpoint, he was phenomenal. And the Browns' running game hurt badly when he was, dinged up with the high ankle. He is a monster. Which again, Amari Cooper, David Njoku, Elijah Moore, Donovan Peoples-Jones, who's the fourth guy and had a great year last year as the third guy. Biggest thing with tight end you worry about, one, we've never gotten an answer, and I'm not to say we should, with Harrison Bryant's illness.
I forgot about him, honestly, until I saw the roster come out today. Yeah, I totally forgot.
He's been out. Now, it sounds like they did not put him on non-football illness, which suggests that he's, I would think, past enough. He's working out on the side and stuff, so I assume he's past whatever it was, if it was like mono or God only knows. Leprosy, who knows? But hopefully that means he's close enough that he's going to be in shape. I feel very good about Jordan Akins as the second tight end. But the thing you worry about is they have one true inline tight end, David Njoku. If he gets hurt, it becomes weird, and you're juggling guys. It's probably gonna be a lineman that becomes the jumbo tight end, and then they just sort of go around.
Yeah, well, that a position group that we so heavily relied on the last couple of years, Kevin Stefanski. So it's just funny how it's completely flipped.
Which is another thing to me.
I think that goes to show how they feel about their wide receiving room and their quarterback.
Yes, this is the thing, is suggesting, Kevin Stefanski can't adapt. What, really? He went from he's on his third quarterback now, and they've all been successful. Yeah. He goes to he as he should adapts his offense around the guys who are really good.
Correct.
Shocker. He's not.
But he's not able to make adjustments in game. He's not smart enough to make adjustments in game.
No, none of us are perfect. I mean, some of our Hugh Jackson, who didn't adapt to shit. Offensive line. We know who the starting five are. Obviously, the major question there is going to be Jedrick Wills. I do think watching preseason, he's being over criticized.
Yeah.
But he is still obviously the biggest question. There's no getting around it. He's inconsistent.
Yeah.
Has a world of talent, which is what makes it so frustrating. And he's had great tests the past 2 weeks, because even though the Chiefs played their backups, they did play the guy who's going to be starting defensive end for them. And I thought Jedrick Wills did a nice job with him. And then the previous week it was Chase Young, and there were a couple of plays where Chase Young got a little bit of the better of him, but he's Chase Young.
Told you he's one of the scapegoats for the season. Cade York's already gone. Can't blame Cade.
That's true.
But I feel like Jed's one to look out for.
And then you get people who are posting clips of Myles Garrett with no pads on, blowing by this guy, and you're like, well, Jed sucks. And
imagine if Myles wasn't doing that, then we'd all be worried about Myles.
Right. Well, it's just the left tackle, late 80s and early 90s. You're like, well, my left tackle can't block Lawrence Taylor, Reggie White. Join the club. Nobody can block Myles Garrett. This is the thing. And so, do I think Jedrick Wills is going to be perfect? No. Is he going to have a game where you're just where is he at? Probably. But if he could just recapture what he played as a rookie, he will be fine. Like that's still his best season. So we'll see what happens on that. Obviously, we'll see what the right side of the line was. They sort of tapered off down the end of last year. Jack Conklin was still coming back from the knee. He's fully healthy this year, which makes a big deal. Wyatt Teller got hurt part of last year. And again, I think David Njoku going down hurt them, but they should be in good shape. And Joel Bitonio is a Hall of Famer. The guy I wanted. That's right. Anyway, backups. DeJuan Jones. Love him. Doing great.
Yeah.
I don't think he's ready for Sunday yet. And thankfully, clips of him trying to block Myles Garrett made their way out. And he looked like a guy trying to block Myles Garrett. Like, slow down. He's very talented, but I don't know that he's there yet. Brian Baldinger loves this man. First of all,
I love Brian Baldinger like so much.
Yes. But like, did you see him post the Pacific Man Array?
I did see a clip. I didn't listen to it, but I saw it.
It's just a picture. That's it.
Okay, it was just that I did see that and I laughed out loud.
He just loves DeJuan Jones, and then he posts a clip where he's got all 4 Browns offensive rookies in on the play for Cedric Tillman, who looked phenomenal on the play he showed too. But he's all in, like he loves it. And yes, I love Brian Baldinger, the most enthusiastic football fan ever.
Yeah, you said you can tell he's standing up when he is talking. Yeah, he
clearly standing up every time he's doing
amazing.
It's awesome. So you got him, you got Luke Whippler, you got Nick Harris, who's been there, and then you have the question mark. So wording made this a bigger mess than it needed to be. The Browns waived, quote unquote, Michael Dunn on his birthday, which prompted any number of people to go, why are they doing this to him on his birthday? Which part of me was thinking maybe that's what he wanted for his birthday. But ultimately, he's not waived. His contract was terminated. He has been, for whatever reason, he's been in the league long enough that he can just be released and not go through the waiver process. The Browns have done this multiple times with linemen in particular. For his birthday, he's going to probably get a few more bucks and some more guaranteed money when he's re-signed. It's going to allow the Browns to put Jordan Kunaszyk and Alex Wright on injured reserve for 4 weeks. They're going to re-sign him. They've done this before. They did this with Greg Robinson. They did this with another guard at some point. So maybe something weird happens, but Michael Dunn should be back. I was baffled by it.
Everyone was outraged.
Yes, he's their sixth best offensive lineman. He just is. So when you think about it and you go release, and your immediate reaction is okay. So they've got 9 there. I think it will end up being 10. Defensive line, they kept 9. This is where things get weird, and I knew they would. Obviously, the guys they kept: Myles Garrett, Obo Okoronkwo, Dalvin Tomlinson, Shelby Harris, Zadarius Smith, Siaki Ika, Jordan Elliott, which people kept trying to cut. I knew he wasn't going anywhere. His contract was restructured specifically to guarantee him more money for at trading off the amount. Isaiah McGuire, giving them 9 guys. They cut Maurice Hurst and they cut Tristan Hill. Maurice Hurst is probably going to be the exact same scenario as Michael Dunn. And I think we've talked about this on the pod, that there was a possibility they would cut him and just re-sign him. I think Tristan Hill, they may try to get back to the practice squad. We shall see. Again, they guaranteed him some money, and I feel like, 1, that was to get him here, and then 2, to be like, incline him to be like, well, if I'm going to go to a practice squad, I might as well go to the Browns. I'm already here. They gave me more money. Why not just stick around? And that would give them a nice little extra depth piece, which I do think is valuable to them. When they place those guys, I expect Maurice Hurst will be back. He rushes the passer. He got progressively better over the preseason and started looking like a guy. And people are like talking about, well, why do they want all these different guys? Maurice Hurst is not here to stop the run. He's not good at it. So they've got to have big guys in there to be able to do that. Tristan Hill theoretically could be one of them. But now, if they go into their straight rush package with Myles Garrett and Obo Okoronkwo on the edges, they bring Zadarius Smith into the B gap. I would not be surprised at all if Maurice Hurst becomes that 4th guy who rushes, either over the center or over the other guard, and just helps them wreak havoc. But again, this was sort of the thing with him, is you could do this, cut him, and potentially bring him back without issue. Linebackers is another spot that's weird, but it'll sort itself out. They keep nominally 7 because Kunaszyk is one of them. They're going to put him on IR. We talked about Diabate. Tony Fields is still here, which doesn't surprise me. Matt Adams makes sense for special teams. Sione Takitaki, which is awesome for him because it means he's healthy after he had to work his ass off with that ACL. Anthony Walker, they're both expected to be ready for week 1, which is awesome for them. Anthony Walker obviously got in a little bit of that last preseason game. And then JOK, who should be poised for a big, big year. I'll be curious to see if they try to do some roster shenanigans after the dust has settled around the league and maybe try to move somebody to the practice squad. I'm hoping Charlie Thomas ends up there. Love him as a guy that they can sort of develop for the long haul. Corners. We knew in April who the 6 corners on this team were going to be. It was done. Denzel Ward, Martin Emerson Jr., Greg Newsome, AJ Green, who signed a contract with $900,000 guaranteed. He wasn't going anywhere. They drafted Cameron Mitchell, who's been a very pleasant surprise and is going to play a ton of special teams. And Michael Ford Jr., who's going to play special teams, but actually did some nice things at corner in training camp, which is good. It was because everybody knew this. So agents knew this. Every other undrafted free agent knew this. So the Browns got slim pickings on undrafted rookie corners. So I'm not surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if the Browns don't try to sign any of the guys they had here to the practice squad. I didn't think any of them stood out. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they like Biggers more than I do. All I saw was a bunch of guys getting torched. And it was a similar deal with safety. Although, they keep the big 3, which is great. Grant Delpit, Juan Thornhill, Rodney McLeod, Ronnie Hickman makes it, which is great. I love what he does, and I like the fit with this team. He's got warts to fix, but I think the Browns defense puts him in a position to minimize those issues. And then D'Anthony Bell. D'Anthony Bell is awful on defense. I think they're trying to grow him into a linebacker. They've done it before, but he's very, very good on special teams. Has drawn praise from all kinds of coaches around the league for his element on special teams. And the second the Browns went down to 2 quarterbacks, that was the immediate guy I thought was going to make the roster. So you've got D'Anthony Bell, you've got Matt Adams as just those are 2 guys who are here for special teams and nothing else. And ultimately Kunashik will join that group, even though he's technically depth at linebacker. Those are sort of your Bubba Ventrone guys to sort of help you out. The one guy I hope makes it to the practice squad because he's sneaky effective is Tanner McAllister. There's some speculation that he's going to get picked up by somebody. The other undrafted Ohio State Buckeye who went to both OSUs, did not make splash plays, but was sneaky effective in coverage and just doing sort of that, what I've called the MJ Stewart role, where he's sort of a mix between a corner and a safety. Coverage wise, just does a lot of nice things that are helpful. I would really like to see him come back because I think he's a sneaky player that could be valuable at some point. But those are the guys that sort of got rewarded in terms of rookies. Those safeties worked out pretty well. And then Charlie Hewitt, Corey Bojorquez, and then Dustin Hopkins. And if Dustin Hopkins misses his first field goal, people may just absolutely storm the field and take Corey Bojorquez out in pieces. Because at that point, they'll be convinced it's the holder's fault.
It's the holder's fault.
Yes.
Listen, I can't. I think we all need to mentally prepare for just a kicking carousel this year.
Yes, I mean, that's
I hate to say it.
And there's a lot of teams that did this. It's funny how the Titans had no kicker. They traded for, I think, Nick Folk from the Patriots, and somebody else did the same thing with trading for a kicker who didn't have one. This is, and again, we talked about this. This is why they tried to draft Cade York. They wanted to be off of this.
Yeah.
And now, again, I think Dustin Hopkins will make the kicks he's supposed to make. But if he doesn't, then we're in the wheel. And we're just doing this kicker of the week type deal, which is really irritating. And then ultimately get into another situation. Go, well, let's draft a kicker.
Oh, no, let's not.
So that's where we're at roster wise. As I said, I expect Jordan Kunashik and Alex Wright to put it on IR. I expect Michael Dunn and Maurice Hurst to be signed, and that will be the 53. Maybe there's some weird wild card where somebody got released that the Browns like better somewhere, and then they just release somebody else. It could happen. I don't think it's going to happen. I think the Browns are very happy with who they have. And this is a year where I felt like the Browns had had way more than 53 guys that were NFL players, which is a step towards where they should be. I feel like they're in good shape. Obviously, you want guys to be healthier. You want Denzel Ward to be healthy. You want Jordan Kunaszyk to be healthy. You want all these guys to be healthy, ready to go. But we are now there once these other moves get sorted out, and that's your 53 getting ready for the Cincinnati Bengals. We are less than 2 weeks away from kicking off against the Bengals at home in a game that will, I'm sure, not be a big deal to anyone, and will just be okay regardless of what happens, and we'll just be sort of like, oh, I guess they lost or I guess they won, and we'll move on. Either the Browns will be in the Super Bowl after a week. Either the Browns will be in the Super Bowl after the week, or everybody's fired. That's typically how every NFL franchise takes it, but that's sort of where we're at.
Also, I feel like week one, let's just like get everyone prepared for this. We have next week. We can get everyone prepared for that. Week one, there's like weird things. It like never fails. Like if you look at week one and then how the rest of the season plays out, it's typically not, it doesn't mean anything. So like, let's just keep things into perspective.
Yeah. I mean,
it's going to be a long week next week, Pete.
Well, it's just going to be, the thing is, like, again, and I get it. The NFL has a shorter season than other leagues, but it's still a long season. And the team that comes out there and I say this for the Bengals too, because they obviously bookend the season. The teams that take the field in week 17 are going to be completely different from the teams that take the field in week one. And it's going to be about dealing with the journey. Now, obviously, and we'll talk about this next week, that first month is important in terms of 1-3 is not going to be good. Certainly 0-4 is not going to be, we got to 2-2. If you get better than 2-2, everybody's going to be loving life. But that's sort of where we're at. So next week, we're going to make, a series of predictions in terms of who we feel good about, breakout players, potentially, season predictions, all those type of things, and may start getting into talking about the Bengals, may dip into some of the other AFC North teams, because it's going to be a bloodbath. You have to take Kenny Pickett seriously based on what I've seen. I don't know if he's going to be a star, but if you're sitting there assuming he's going to be terrible, I don't think that's realistic. Now, maybe the Browns can kill him because their line isn't there yet, but that's going to be one of the questions we talk about. All these teams look very good. Is the Browns defensive line going to shrivel them up and kill them? That would be great, but we will talk about it. A lot of things to go over in the next week, and it's going to be a long time. Certainly next week will drag. Thankfully, that's, they got the Thursday's kickoff to go, but it's going to take some time. So plenty to talk about next week.